Good morning. Good morning. Hope everyone is doing well. We're going to give you guys a few more minutes to come on and jump in for what we believe will be a critically important conversation about the role of Black fathers in TV commercials. So if you got to run, go get a cup of coffee or tea, so you can be comfortable to engage us. And we want this to be a dialogue. We're going to be presenting some key findings. We're going to show you guys some commercials that we want you, commercials and ads that we're going to want you to respond to. So we're going to be starting momentarily. Always feel free to use the chat function if you have a burning question or comment. And then we also have an additional Q&A function that if you want to place your question, even if you have questions now, before we officially get started, you can begin to drop your questions in because, again, we want this to be a dialogue. So we're going to start in about another 30 seconds. So you guys relax, get comfortable, and we are about to start in about 15 seconds. Want to be conscious of your time and our time. Again, we have a great deal of content, but most importantly, we want to hear from the folks in the building. Want you to respond to some of the research that we're going to share, as well as some of your views and perspectives on some commercials that we will show you, as well as toward the end, when we outline sort of a call to action. We're also going to connect you with a few websites that provide some additional resources. And so, good people, good morning. My name is Dr. David Miller. I'm a senior technical writer with Fathers Incorporated and one of the founding fellows of the Moynihan Institute for Fatherhood Research and Policy. I have two of my very, very distinguished colleagues in the building. Dr. Janice Kelly from Malloy University in upstate, well, not upstate, she's actually in Long Island. I don't know why I keep placing her further north, but she's actually in Long Island, New York. Is a communications professional and has done a tremendous amount of research in the communication and in the media space. So you can definitely check her out on LinkedIn or do a Google search to actually check out, or go to Google Scholar if you're interested in viewing some of her work. Next, we have Dr. Jeffrey Shears. He just got back from makeup, y'all, so he looking shiny. No, he just came back from the makeup truck from University of North Carolina at Charlotte. Dr. Shears is one of the leading researchers in the country, really looking specifically at fatherhood and the value add that fathers bring to families. And so we have a really strong panel, a very knowledgeable panel, both in terms of research and practice. And my area of research is Black fathers raising daughters. And again, for all of us, you can go to Google Scholar or any of the other places that you do your searching for articles and presentations and things of that nature. And so again, our discussion today will be that representation matters, the role of others in TV commercials. Ladies and gentlemen, there has been research looking at Black fathers in TV shows, but there's just not enough. I mean, the research is pretty scant when you think about really drilling down and looking at Black fathers in TV commercials. And so we will be releasing a paper which really outlines our key findings, give you an idea of our demographics in terms of who participated in our study. But that will be coming at a later date. So next slide. So the Moynihan Institute, many of us have read the infamous Moynihan report. What we decided as a group of researchers and professionals is to really look at strengths-based research as it relates to Black fathers, and to look at Black fathers as protective factors in the lives of children. So we are aggressively looking at strengths-based research as it relates to fathers. We just finished an article that will be coming out, a special edition of the Child Welfare Journal. We just finished another qualitative study looking at attitudes among low-income fathers in Fulton County, Georgia. So again, our main focus is to look at strengths-based research as it relates to Black fathers. Historically, much of the research has looked at Black fathers through a deficit lens. And so as a body of researchers, our goal is to change the game. So we can go to the next slide. I think we got a little poll question for you. Okay, we don't have a poll question. So what we're going to do is we're going to show you a video, a commercial, and what we would like for you to do is share in the chat your responses, reflections, ideas to the it's called the cheerleader commercial, and then we'll come back, I think, and we'll get the polling question. So again, we want you to be open and honest, really transparent, and share with us in the chat your thoughts about this first ad.
Oh, those boys are much too much. Those boys are much too much. We got the spirit. We're hot. We can't be stopped. We got the spirit. We're hot. We can't be stopped. We're going to beat them and bust them. Beat them.
The smallest moments can have the biggest impact on a child's life.
Let's get a little bit rowdy. R-O-W-D-Y.
Take time to be a dad
One more
today.
time. Oh, those boys are much too much. Those boys.
So, ladies and gentlemen, that's actually one of our favorite commercials. Just take a moment and drop in the chat any thoughts or reflections you have based on that first commercial. And that's actually called Cheerleader. That was done over a decade ago, but it's still a very popular commercial that folks really like.
2009.
2009.
When it was, aired.
So drop your drop any comments in the chat. We'll come back and maybe read a few of those comments. But while you're also doing that, we have a poll question that we would also like you to respond to. Have we made significant improvements of the representation of Black TV commercials? And that's pretty straightforward. That's a yes or no response. So I know some people don't like taking quizzes. This is a pretty easy one. Just put a yes or no. Just give us a yes or no response. And then I think we have 2 questions or comments in the Q&A box.
You want me to read it?
Yes.
Oh, someone just said the chat is disabled.
The chat is disabled. Oh, interesting. Okay.
Not anymore. I just enabled it.
Okay. You can respond now.
Yes.
Thank you.
Many apologies, tech challenges. So just jump in the chat and please respond. Thanks for giving us the heads up. Any reflections based on the cheerleader commercial, you can now drop them in the chat. And then can you bring that poll question up again, please?
It's Beth said that the ad is effective. It's showing father and daughter together. Love the commercial, especially dad and daughter. Well done.
Okay.
Now, don't forget this ad or this commercial was aired in 2009. Does anything else stand out when you look at that ad? I'm just curious. Love the surprise ending, including how it challenges initial perceptions about what was happening. Okay.
And then Brian put, love the commercial, especially dad and daughter. Well
Mhm.
done.
Just a quick question. It doesn't have to be a poll. How many of you have seen an ad with a Black father in front of public, or I should just say an apartment building? An apartment building.
Mm.
Because that's one of the unique things. I'm from Manhattan, Harlem, New York. And what stood out for me in 2009 and even today is how rare you see a father or any kind of a Black father. Let me be specific, but a fatherhood ad in front of an apartment building. Yes, I have.
Interesting. Interesting.
Mhm.
So I got a couple more we're going to read. Great commercial, a man helping his daughter to practice cheerleading,
Mhm.
challenges gender stereotypes. And just some other comments related to your
Mhm.
question.
Mhm.
Yes, a father helping could be helping with homework.
Mhm. Mhm.
You guys can keep sharing any reflections as we move on. And so, ladies and gentlemen, our topic is relatively simple this morning. We want to delve deeper into your reflections, your ideas, your thoughts as it relates to Black dads, Black fathers, and TV commercials. We're also going to share some of our research because this is part of a larger qualitative study. But how do we change narratives about Black fathers, particularly as it relates to images? So those are some of the things that we want you guys to begin to think about. We also want you to think about the power that media has in shaping cultural narratives. And when we think about media, we're thinking about TV commercials. We also have to think about ads on social media, whether it's Instagram, TikTok, or Facebook. Again, beginning to think about the power that media has in shaping cultural narratives.
Mhm.
Then we also have to begin to look at historical underrepresentation or misrepresentation of Black fathers in the media. So we're going to show you some ads that created a firestorm of controversy a couple of years ago. Want you to chime in, share your perspective. Did you see the ad? When you initially saw the ad, did the ad raise some concerns? So those are some of the things that we want you to think about. And how do we shift toward inclusive advertising and its social impact? So we got to have a deeper conversation about creatives. Who's making these commercials? Who's funding the commercial? Who green lights content? When a commercial is produced, usually people kind of sit around a room, they have a creative session, they kind of decide, does this best represent our brand? They lay a track, they lay some music onto it, and then they produce the commercial. Well, who's in the room deciding the commercials that make it to primetime networks? And so again, we got to have a deeper conversation around the industry. So we can go to the next slide. Dr. J.
Mhm. So before the 1990s, Black fathers were rarely depicted in newspapers, magazines, and television. And part of that had to do that if you did see a Black father, he was part of the backdrop, right? He was not the primary character on TV commercials. And so we do know that mainstream white America advertising agencies normally just did not include fathers in TV, in print ads. However, at the same time, during the 1950s to the 1990s, we did see Black fathers and Black working class and middle class fathers in primarily print ads. And many of these ads were in Jet, Black Enterprise, Essence, Ebony, The Crisis, Negro Digest. So you did have representation of fathers. And what caused that representation to shift, meaning to have more fathers, print ad fathers, Black fathers, was the growing number of Black advertising agencies, right? So that really pushed the representation and the challenge of showing the real Black family. You had ads where a father in overalls was sitting in the living room reading a newspaper or watching his two children playing checkers, or the father was outside helping his son, fix the car, or the other father was in the kitchen helping the wife cook. So you had more diversity of representation because you had Black advertising agencies. However, you still had in mass media an invisibility or absentee trope, or Black absentee father trope existing. You did not have even children books or books in general that focused on Black fathers and their interaction with children. And that really caused the myth, as we now call it, the myth of Black fathers' engagement in the family. And this created a stereotype that we even see today. Can we go to the Macy's and the Heinz ad? Oh, it's at the bottom. That's okay. That's okay. You can go back to the previous slide. I'll just show that a little later. And so what we've been doing is collecting some of these absentee Black father tropes in print ad and even in some TV commercials to really kind of gather and see where we're going in terms of not just representation, but in terms of a political movement of calling out certain ads and agencies. And so as we look at these representations, we have to look at the impact. And I wanted to show you, as I started to do this research, or we started to do this research, looking at from 2018 to 2022, started to look at some of the top ads on television. Now, let me be very clear. I know that most people are moving away from television and streaming, but you're still finding people watching network television, and you now have ads in streaming circles. So ads still exist. Okay. And so one of the things that we wanted to look at is what's out there. Have we made significant shifts and changes and fair representation of Black fathers in commercials? And what's the impact, of what we're watching? Is it healthy and functioning and causing us to say we have made some significant changes or not? You can go to, and so the first two commercials you're going to watch, we had 15 commercials, as I said, 2018 to 2022. And these two commercials that you're going to watch in a minute were the top two commercials. So let's play those top two commercials. This is called the Denny's commercial.
What I think is perfect that we came here to have a booth chat just amongst father and son, right? What I brought you here to find out what's going on in your life. What's going on in your life, huh? Really? And that's your favorite cartoon? They canceled it? Oh man, we gotta send a letter to the network and tell them they gotta bring that back. Ah, that is good bacon, right? Exactly why coming to Denny's makes us feel better about that. Thanks, bro. Appreciate that. Thanks. The bacon was amazing. You're right. You know what I'm saying? We don't even got to worry about it because we can come here, have breakfast, eat, right, and talk about it, right? We can come here and talk about it. Right, I got you. Don't worry about it. Right, exactly. Thank you for bringing Daddy here. I appreciate you. Oh. Is that your grand finale? Because if so, you buttered me up. You got me. You buttered me up. You won me over.
So as we proceed to the next commercial, take a moment and drop your reflections in the chat. Rodney, this dad went viral for this technique. I love it. I think it's Daniel. I've never seen this type of commercial on a network. So as we transition to the next commercial, please share with us thoughts, perspectives, reflections on that Denny's commercial.
Having kids was the #1 thing on my list. I obviously put my family first, and then everything else falls behind.
This Father's Day, Dove Men is supporting dads in caring for their loved ones. You care for your family. Let Dove Men care for you. Discover all we do to care for you and your family at dovemencare.com/dads.
And again, please share any reflections or comments. A couple people said they've never seen this commercial before. Anyone else want to share? Dr. Jeff, let me go to you really super quickly. What are your thoughts before we go back over to Dr. Kelly? What were your thoughts on the two commercials you just saw?
I thought both of the commercials were super impactful, particularly, first of all, showing fathers in a positive light, showing father interacting with his son, particularly in the Denny's commercial, right, just by himself. It's rare that we see fathers, particularly with young children, or toddlers or infants, by themselves, right? You know the old trope about men and babies, like we're two thumbs and we don't know how to handle children. And so that's just affirming to men because, you know, as I'll talk about a little bit, like these commercials are so impactful because they actually give us positive imagery and introduce us to ideas that we might not have seen. And so just think about a father who may not have ever been a part of a family or a community where he sees fathers alone with young children, and we just introduced that idea to him. And so, and seeing fathers being impactful in families, reading, just doing normal things that, as Dr. Kelly had alluded to before, we've always been told that Black fathers are uninvolved. And so again, sharing positive images, and we know that's not true. You know, I'll share some literature research findings here in a minute that disproves that. But again, showing those images about fathers engaged with their children is super, super, super impactful.
Couple quick comments, Dr. Kelly, before I come back to you. Denny's beautiful modeling language and helping kids to communicate. Booths were made for love, priceless. It was wise to do for Dove to target Black men. I like the Dove commercials. It shows the whole family. Sorry for being late. I'm going to say the same thing. So again, some really positive feedback, from each and every one of you. So we'll go back to Dr. J.
What made this, so let me just go back a little bit. We did a survey. We had a sample size of 57 fathers ranging from 18 to 55 plus. And what made those two ads, number one, we had a characteristic slide or Likert scale, And for many of them, they said the issue of competency, caregiving, helping, loving, and laughing were the variables that stuck out for those two ads. And they felt that, as some of you already suggested, where are these ads? Why aren't they on repeat? How do you get to see those ads? And for many of you, you're right, it not on network television, right? And so we don't, this is where we have to call out sometimes advertisers to say, why aren't we seeing this on a network television with a wider audience of viewers? So I do agree with that. But the competency, the caregiving, the helping, the loving, the engagement were the number one factors as to why those two commercials stood out. Okay, we can go to the next two ads.
Right now, you're planning for your future, whether it's a bigger family or taking care of the one you already have. You deserve to work with a company that's been invested in planning for the future for nearly 170 years. Learn more at massmutual.com.
Please share any reflections. And then I see Sherry has her hand up. So super quickly, guys, put your reflections, thoughts in the chat. And Kenny, we want to try to go to Sherry really quickly to take a question or comment. So we're going to try to go to Sherry.
Don't respond well to that. Interesting question, Javin. Did you see that question, Dr.
Sherry, you're unmuted. You can talk.
Sherry, you had a question or comment?
You have to unmute yourself.
Sorry, I didn't have a question. I was just navigating through the presentation.
Oh, okay.
Sorry about that.
No problem. So we're trying to manage all of the questions and comments that are coming in before we go to the next slide.
Danielle, can you go to Danielle's question? Because she said, is there a significant difference between father and son and father and daughter commercials? Is that what you mean, Danielle? Oh, and when you say they hit differently, just maybe a sentence or two, what do you mean by hit differently?
Danielle, your line is unmuted.
Yeah, Danielle, you're off mute.
Okay. So I felt a different emotional pull when watching the father and son compared to the father and daughter. The father and daughter commercial kind of appealed to my nurturing side, but I don't know how much the role of me being a mother plays into that. Whereas the father and son is almost like legacy. It's almost like a responsibility imposed, having that commercial leadership strength. But I'm getting more of the nurturing side when I watch the father and daughter. So I'm seeing two different, I don't know, dynamics being played out as I'm considering them both.
So when you were watching the father with the cheerleading dad, did you see nurturing in that commercial at all?
Yeah, I almost see whereas he showed up. Now with the son, I don't really get that he showed up. I get you were supposed to be there. It's a different type of. I'm really trying because I'm deciphering as I'm watching it and figuring it out myself. But it just seems like they hit differently to me. It's more of a commandment with the father and son, and more of Daddy, you know, you showed up, you know, you're teaching me, you're showing me, you're there. I'm, you know, from what I'm supposed to do or what type of man in my life, whereas the son is, you're supposed to be here. Like, I won't be able to survive without you.
And so Daniel, I think you raise a very interesting perspective, which could definitely be an entirely different study for us. And you know, our interest is again to kind of delve deeper in this space because, as I said initially, a lot of the research is scant. It just doesn't really exist. But you raise some interesting points about how would folks be impacted by the different styles of commercials, whether it's an older child, a younger child, the setting. You know, one was in a Denny's, and you got the cheerleader, and then you got the Dove commercial. So again, I think all of those different nuances could be measured in terms of people's you know, impact. So thank you for
You're
that
welcome.
reflection.
David, if I could, I'd like to add to that.
Please.
This is Kenneth Braswell with Fathers Incorporated. Danielle, that what you're describing is something that we, as an agency, and more specifically with the work that we do with the National Responsible Fatherhood Clearinghouse, have come to realize, and that is the intention in the delivery of the message isn't often the same as how someone receives the message, right? And so, especially when it comes to fatherhood, we had an ad in the early years. The campaign ad was "Take time to be a dad." Now, some people will hear that and say, yeah, you know, I should take time to be a dad today. I'm busy. I'm doing a lot of traveling. I got a lot going on, but I need to be a little more conscious about taking time to be a dad. And we would get a lot of comments from across the country from people who loved the ad, embraced the messaging, take time to be a dad. But there was a whole nother segment of the population who heard the government shouldn't be telling me what to do and how to be a dad. And it was negative to them. And it was baffling at first until we began to really think about how you can have all the intention in the world to deliver a message to people, but there's going to be a population that is going to see it differently. And so I guess the moral to the story for us was you're never going to touch everybody.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah,
David.
I get that. I get that. I'm sorry, I'm gonna mute myself. I get that, but I think I'm speaking more so that there is a gender role difference here in how ads are communicating to the masses, whether they believe that government involvement should play a role or shouldn't play a role, or you know, the message overall. But it I don't know. I would be curious to know in your future studies how it affects both sexes when they're looking at this, because for me it's a stronger energy looking at that dad and that son. It's a stronger energy coming through. And I'm not so much focusing on the message, more so just the imagery, the strength, the intangible things coming through when I see a father and son, and that commercial speaks volume much differently than a father. And I don't know if it's softer when the father and the daughter, it comes across softer. It comes across, again, more nurturing, more, it just doesn't come across to me the same way. So, all right.
Well, thank you. Let's go to Dr. Jeff.
Yeah, well, I just
Well,
want to say this.
there's a question I just want to answer in the chat from Jabin, I'm not sure I pronounced it for him. And
Yeah.
anyway, the question is there an idea out there that fathers of other colors don't respond well to ads with Black fathers? Those seem like good ads in general. And as we've kind of alluded to, that there's, particularly around commercials, the literature is scant. So I don't think anyone has done a study looking at how other men. I mean, prime example, our study, our population were African Americans, and we didn't poll others to see how they receive these commercials. So I think that might be a next, it might be a next step for us also to expand our participants in how they perceive these media imagery.
Okay, Dr. J.
Yeah. I just want to go back to what Danielle said, because we do see moments of nurturing. This ad, I don't know if I took it out or not, the one at the bottom where the father and the son are fighting over the restaurant check. And when she was talking about tradition and connection, this commercial did not resonate well with my population of my study, but I thought it was so moving that the older father grabbed the check at the restaurant, and I don't know if we have the commercial, but the son grabs the check, and thanks for attending. Oh, okay. And they're both tugging at the receipt, and the son says, "You taught me well, it's my turn." So we do have moving moments in advertising, and I think it's very important to say that the point of advertising is not just to sell product, but to make emotional connections with their viewers. And so you're right, we're not going to be able to speak to everyone, or advertisers can't relate to everyone and what they want to see, but what they try to do is resonate as much as they can with emotional appeal. And that's what they're doing, right? The Nike ad with LeBron and his son resonates with father and son connections. And so that's what advertisers do. And some of them do it very well, and others miss the mark. That's just part of the branding and the agencies. Sometimes they can make those connections and show Black love, Black joy, resiliency and success, and sometimes they miss their mark. You can go to the next.
Yeah, the other thing too is Brian Doyle's comment, target the teachable population.
Yeah.
And so, because in advertising, I think it's important to understand about advertising, everything is the message, not
Yes.
just the wording. It's the imagery, it's the feeling, it's the terminology, it's the interpretive culture, it's the responding culture. Everything is a part of the message, including gender. And so when you look at it from a gender perspective, men are going to see that commercial very differently than women. Moms are going to see it very differently than dads. And so it is all the message. It's not just the conversation that's being had. It is a part of the entire thing that you're into, what Dr. Kelly just talked about, which is the entire mood of the message. And even if you try to be absolutely perfect in covering all of those aspects, someone will still, from their own eye and their own perspective, will see something different.
Yeah. Well, I was collecting ads for the last couple of years, and these two ads stood out. Now, the one to the right is the Macy's 2018 Christmas campaign. And these were printed ads, right? And I have to tell you, this set off a firestorm of complaints, that it was not just complaints on the internet, it became a complaint on network television. And if you look at these 4 family shots, you will notice at the bottom of the left, there's a mother with 3 boys, and the father is not there. And this just caused a wave of a pushback, a complaint. Macy's did apologize, but the damage was done, right? And so that really propelled me to want to do research on representation of fathers in printed ads or just commercials. But then let's just say this, there was a different geographical setting, and here comes a Heinz commercial. This is 2024. So Macy's was 2018. Heinz is 2024. right? And you can see that this young woman is getting married. Her mother is there. There's no father. Now, this caused also a wave of complaints. Some people, as Kenneth just said, had a different perspective. Maybe the Black father was taking the picture. Maybe that could have been it. But people felt that this was just another Black absentee trope, that the father was not even included in this young girl's life. And so many had concerns about this ad. That was just last year, and felt that Hines owed an apology for this misrepresentation. Any thoughts before
So
we go?
we're going to assume that he was the Black dad was taking the picture. That's the assumption we're going to come away with the print.
That's what some people wrote. Yes. And they said, well, why couldn't the father take the picture? And I read that, I kind of dismissed it. But that's again, for Hines to say, mea culpa, I apologize, overlooked, said something that they realized, again, just like Macy's, that they felt comfortable excluding Black fathers from the ad. Just call it. Someone just wrote something, David, in the chat.
Yeah. So again, you guys, both ads created a huge firestorm, particularly the Macy's ad. They ended up pulling the ad. Please take a moment, share your reflections. I'm going to go to, got a couple of comments in the chat. Give me 1 second. I want to go to Dr. Easley's comment.
They never forget to include white fathers. Absolutely. Yeah.
Well, we got so many messages coming in. Give us 1 second. Dr. Easley, did you want to unmute your line and jump in and share?
And Dr. Easley comment about represent primary role model is timely.
And gender.
Hi, good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. How you doing?
Yes, I'm doing well. Well, thank you so much for having this wonderful dialogue. Now, just a couple of things. I was wondering with Danielle's comment, it sounded like she was kind of wrestling with seeing the dad with a girl as opposed to with a son, and that seemed kind of unnatural to her. And that was my interpretation of what she was sharing. So I'm just wondering if we're socialized and conditioned that the same-sex parent is often the primary role model or seen as that. And so sometimes it may be challenging for us if we see a different sex parent with that child. And perhaps that's something that, some of us need to work on to naturalize that and make that as acceptable, no matter, regardless of the gender or the sex of the child, if that makes sense.
It does. Good point, Doc. And my research looks at Black fathers and daughters, the relationship, the impact that Black fathers have on the social and emotional development of their daughters. And once again, the research is very scant. I mean, research on fathers and daughters across the board is limited, but when we drill down the research on Black fathers and daughters, it's again very scant. So these are some areas from a research standpoint that we really want to delve more deeply. And so got a couple more comments. Dr. Jeff, I didn't know if you wanted to share anything.
But there's also, I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Dr. Kelly. I was just saying that some of the comments, some more great comments in our discussion on the chat is really in depth. So
yeah. But this also tells you that we're not even at the creation stages of development of commercials, that we are not part of the focus group of how these commercials are rolled out. It's telling you also that we are absent in owning our image and absent of how people would perceive. Now, we're not monolithic, so we know that, but we're absent from how mass media rolls out and describes us to others. And that becomes the major problem, right? Because if Macy's or Hines had some of us at the creative table, this would not have been produced at all. at all. All right. Someone would have pulled them and said, hey, we got a problem here. Yet this went out, and then here comes the firestorm of complaints. Okay.
Questions, comments, any other questions or comments before we move on? And again, these are two glaring examples, and there are others.
Yeah.
I think many times people watch commercials, and you're watching a commercial, but you may not necessarily be looking at the commercial through a critical lens. And so a lot of times these kinds of misrepresentations and stereotypes are woven into a lot of commercials, ads that you see in magazines, print stuff, etc.
And that there's a fight not to take this as normal, right? There's this thing that if you feel it, then call it out. And have a dialogue and push at, calling the industry or the company and say, hey, I got a problem with the representation in that ad. Because if it wasn't for people calling out Macy's and now Heinz, they maybe would not have this teachable moment. And let's hope it's a teachable moment for them.
So before we move on, there's a recommendation that we send the webinar to Heinz and Macy's and others. I love it. Okay.
Okay. I like that. That's good.
Any other quick reflections on these two? Again, major brands, Heinz and Macy's. Okay.
And again, one was in the United States and one is in South Africa. And that's also concerning, right?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Any other comments? Okay. Excellent insight. Obvious, the absence of Black fathers in commercials. Black fathers are always associated with stereotypes. Again, some rich dialogue.
Yeah.
Right, and then a couple people have made reference to these kinds of studies, these kinds of conversations within the context of the current climate. And so those are some things that we're going to talk about when we get to a call to action and things that we can do as consumers. And then from an academic side, we're interested in engaging more of our colleagues across disciplines to be able to highlight this research and dig a little deeper.
And I think when you look at the Macy's commercial, print ad, excuse me, you see 4 different types of family structures and or 3, excuse me. And that's what really stands out too, right? Because you have 2 traditional, if you want to use that term, family structures, and then you have the single mother, and then you have the same-sex family. And that's really interesting that someone took that position to create the family and say these are the acceptable or marketable images of families, but yet the traditional Black family was not marketable.
And somebody made reference to how hair, wardrobe, and culture is depicted in commercials. Again, from a creative standpoint, how do we ensure that we're at the table when decisions are made in terms of actual content in commercial, how we wear our hair, what we eat? I mean, there's always this conversation around, what happens if you're Black and you go to a cookout and they have raisins in the potato salad? Well, we leaving. I don't know about anybody else. We're not eating no potato salad with raisins in it. So again, looking at things from a cultural standpoint. So, Dr. J.
I think it's important, even if we look at that that these commercials and images are shaping how we see families. And so again, and just going back to the point that all these things are thought out. All these things are planned. So for you to have the Black family fatherless, where we know through research and that, you know, black families aren't fatherless, that we're just kind of still creating the stereotype. Like it could have just as been easily to have, as Dr. Kelly said, a traditional black father. And again, we're beginning to influence, you know, our readers with, oh, that's a great picture of a traditional black father, because of the space that I'm in. I mean, I clearly noticed, like, why did y'all do that? Why is that intentional to leave the black father out of a family portrait?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, Dr. Jens, we can move on.
Okay, you can go to the next slide. Oh.
Yeah.
We don't have.
So as we just think, as we think about, you know, best practices, you know, so one of the things that we even begin to look at fathering in general is, how do men learn how to father? So we know that the biggest influences of how men learn how to father is their own father, and then the next level is families, their family of origin, and then the next is their friends, and then one of the fourth biggest influence on how men father in regards to activities, behaviors, and attitudes is media. And so we don't take lightly the media images that are being portrayed of black fathers, because when those of us who come out of communities, or maybe come out of families that we might not have had involved dad, we might have come out of communities where we didn't see a lot of fathers, then, you know, our friends and media has a really strong influence on how we father, you know, again, our attitudes, what we do. And so really this gives us an opportunity to create content, to influence content. You know, the CDC, my own work, has literally shown that black fathers are involved with their children. If we look historically as by why has this narrative been out here that black fathers aren't involved? Well, early studies of fathering kind of ask the wrong questions, right? When more recent studies of fathering ask fathers what they do, black men tend to do what's traditionally been mothering activities. So we didn't ask fathers back in the day, did you change diapers? Did you fix bottles? Did you feed or whatever? Because historically that was seen as kind of maternal activities. But when we ask fathers those things later on, black fathers tend to do more caregiving activities. And so part of the idea that black fathers haven't been involved is that we as researchers or traditional researchers haven't asked the right questions. Okay. And so the other piece that we know is that men learn through modeling, right? I often joke that most men aren't going to call another man up and ask him, like, man, can you help me potty train this kid? You know, it's just not how we roll, where, you know, it seems that women have a lot more support and they're able to call, you know, big mama, their sister, they, you know, they kind of call, but men, that's, you know, think about it. Your dad or your husband, before Google Maps, we just go drive around and figure out how to get there. We ain't gonna stop and ask nobody, right? And so because men learn through modeling, then these images that we have through commercials are so important and even more impactful. So we want to be intentional about partnering with creators to make sure that we're showing both positive images and things of that nature for young black men. And finally, just kind of due to the importance of the potential impact that media has, we want to begin to recognize media that authentically portray black dads. You know, the dentist commercials, that's a black father with a toddler. Black fathers reading. We go through the whole gamut of cognitive play, physical touch, all the things that are important. We want to begin to at least recognize as an organization the images that we are putting out there for black fathers. So, because, you know, at the end of the day, it's too important that we share our story, that we tell our own story, and that we know that fathers in our community want to have impact. We want to have impact on our children, our families, and communities. And so just trying to influence how we are being portrayed through the media, I think is super impactful, and we're going to be intentional in doing that.
Okay. You go to the next slide. So questions. We're gonna find out what's on your hearts, what's on your minds. Let's go to some Q&A.
You know, and one last thing that we need to talk about is we talk about Black dads here, but I think that's really, you know, a subset of our difficulties to recognize fathers, period, right? As a social worker, and we if we parallel how we show in families in the social media place, that also parallels how we see families in society. You know, we think about, social services, we think about all the resources out there for mothers and children. I mean, one of the findings that came out of our study in Fulton County about father's experience, men say there are no supports for them to do the job they want to be. No supports for them, to be the father that they want to be, insinuating that they want to be the father, but there are no supports. And so I just think these media images are saying correlate with how we see fathers in society in general. That's kind of always been a secondary issue in regards to fathers' impact on children. And we know that fathers have a strong impact, and that fathering is not mothering. They're two different dynamics. And so as a society, we certainly have to begin to value fathers and help educate the masses how important fathers are.
I think from the study, what was interesting is that most fathers ranked commercials high when they saw authentic interaction and play with their children. So this goes back to Dr. Shear's comment, right? Like the father in Denny's, right? Just laughing and enjoying. And what gave a lower ranking of commercials, even if they were emotional in substance, many felt that it was really about the product. So Mass Mutual, you see this father has his new home and he's building furniture for the family, but they felt that it was more about the product than the quality and the interaction of father and child, or a father and family. And what was also interesting with the study is that for many of the fathers, they wanted to move away from, and someone used this word and I thought it was great, that they don't want fathers to be unicorns or heroes. And that's their vocabulary. And they wanted fathers who just wanted to enjoy, to engage, to share wisdom, to be emotionally connected with their children. And they wanted to have quality commercials, like some of the commercials that many of you said you've never seen before. They felt that we need to see more commercials like that, so we can move away from these stereotypes and tropes, that fathers are fully engaged. In 2018, the CDC did a report showing that fathers are engaged with their children, and that they laugh and they do homework and they cook and they clean and they do nails and they do hair. And for Black families, this was news for them. It wasn't news for many of us, but it was news for them. And for the participants in my study, they wanted to see the diversity and the multiple dimensions of Black fathers and what they do in the home on TV commercials, not just having a barbecue, not just kicking it and having a beer and laughing, but truly being active and strong and wise and mature in these images. And I think that spoke volumes in the study. They said no more buffoonery. We have to move away from fathers just laughing. Nothing wrong with laughing, but it's more intentional of the representation and having some control of that representation that goes out into the universe of how they're being portrayed. So it's really the participants in the study were really consciously aware, and they just don't want to see fathers just plucked into a commercial and say, okay, now we did our DEI due diligence. It was really to put being meaningful, intentional, having an emotional connection, and also being proud of what they were producing in terms of representation of Black fathers.
And Dr. Kelly, I think a lot of that also speaks to Black fathers want to ensure that everybody recognizes our humanity.
That's the bottom
That we
line.
father and parent like everybody else.
Yeah.
And so got a couple questions in the chat. And ladies and gentlemen, we're going to be publishing our findings in a paper, as well as we're going to be disseminating a infographic via social media. So because you signed up for this webinar, you'll get a heads up when that information is ready to be released. Tracy's question, do you think there's a shift in thinking about fatherhood importance, roles in the younger generation? Dr. Jeff, Dr. Kelly, do you see any differences in how young fathers view their role versus older fathers?
I've seen a shift, and I've been doing this work for 20 years. And I get a sense now when I'm in the community and dealing with young fathers that they know they're supposed to be doing something. Where beginning this work, it was, fatherhood was kind of, hey, if I'm sending a check to the other side of town, I'm a good dad. That's what, it's kind of what the message that we've sent as a society. And I kind of actually pinpoint some of this stuff with Early Head Start Research Evaluation Project, Fragile Families, like all these research studies about fathers. And then what, some of these commercials that were out several years ago, where we start seeing these images of father. Because we got to think this fathering thing, 25 years ago, we didn't even ask fathers what they did. We asked moms what fathers did. We didn't even collect data. It was like fathering was we're dealing with children and families, like fathering wasn't even a thing to even study. So now I think it's enough imagery out there. I think it's enough things that young men are seeing. They just get a sense, I get a sense that they are attending events. They have, I'm supposed to be doing something. Again, going back to what I said earlier in regards about how do you learn how to father, where if you're coming from this deficit mode where you really didn't have a father and you really didn't see a lot of fathering activities in your community or family, then it's up to us to have resources for these guys. And that's what's coming up. Like, I need to be doing something. Someone show me what to do. And so I do believe there's been a change because men are beginning to realize, our society beginning to realize the importance of fathers. It's just, how a father's important. What do I need to do? Again, because I think all men want to be impactful fathers to their children and families.
I also think that we cannot disregard that we have kids who grew up in front of television, who have had representation and models of the little pieces that they want to take away. And I'm talking about young men who grew up in front of TV, who are now fathers, who have said, I want to be this kind of father and have this characteristics or that characteristics. I was talking to Ken about Papa House, right? The Neighborhood. And now we have those who had shows of the 90s and early 2000s who now have shows back on network television, who are now grandfathers, who are now talking to their sons about fatherhood. I think all of that is rich data and interesting in terms of social learning theory of how to model some of this. You don't take it all, but you take certain pieces of it. And as a young father, you will say, I want to be that kind of dad or have that kind of relationship with my son or daughter. So there's a lot of modeling going on. And, the viewer gets to pick and choose, just like mothers used to have to pick, young girls who grew up to be mothers, picked and choose what kind of mother you want to be like. Well, I think the same is happening for young men. that they get to pick and choose what they want to see as some representation of their relationship as a father.
Yeah, Dr. Jeff, I wanted to add something you said. You said that younger fathers typically know that they need to do something. I think what has changed over the generations is the definition of something, right? Because more seasoned, I don't use the word old anymore, I use seasoned. The more seasoned fathers knew that they had to do something too. Their something just looked different. Their something was, I need to go to work. Beyond that, there was no other expectation of them. The younger generation has an expectation of not only providing, but also nurturing and also engaging on very deeper parental in very deeper parental spaces. And so I think that as we kind of talk about, you know, what fatherhood looks like, there could be some deeper analysis on how that something has changed over generations and how society is now accepting a new definition of what expectations of fathers are, if that makes sense. The second thing is that folks should know, because I think the flip hand side of this coin, right, for us is the fatherhood conversation in general that is inclusive of all fathers is also challenging, right? And so while it is challenging for Black fathers and fathers of color, it is so challenging because the broader narrative is also challenging. And so if you just talk about fathers, period, not Black, white, just fathers in general, there is a difficulty in having that conversation. And so we need to also address how trying to dissect and pull out the nuances and challenges specifically of Black fathers, how much of that is impacted by the challenges of talking about fatherhood in general across the board, so that we all become advocates of the conversation and we're able to move the needle in the ways that those things are necessary. And then the last thing, and Dr. Easley, you right, and you must be in my mind. The third conversation is we also have to have a gender conversation, right? Because there's also a perceived, and I'm not going to get political about this, I'll say perceived just because people are talking about it, or perceived onslaught of challenges as it relates to men in general, and talking about how men show up in the world versus how women show up in the world. And so if we're going to have a gender equity conversation, that gender equity conversation cannot just be about the equity of women. It also has to be the equity of men, because those things that are expected of us are part of family. And so if we're going to talk about equity in that sense, we have to look at it across the board and deal with the challenges that we have, and then be able to come up with solutions to move forward. All of the stuff that you said, Jeff, kicked off all three of those things in my head, and I just wanted to get them out of my head.
Yeah, it is a deeper conversation, Dr. Kelly, Dr. Shears, and Kenny. It is a deeper conversation. I just became a grandfather 5 months ago, and about a month ago, I had the stroller. I had on my little jogging suit. I had the stroller, had my grandson, and we were just going to my favorite coffee house because he was going to take a nap, or at least I thought he was going to take a nap, and I was going to get a little work done. But the number of people who stopped me and were amazed that I was out with my grandchild, I wish I could have recorded everything that people said to me. But I'm just involved in what I perceive to be normal activity. And so, again, I think the larger narrative around fathering is something that we got to have a deeper conversation about. And I do see, Kenny, because I know you're also a multimedia guy, I do see more organizations using social media to promote fathering. You look at some of the work of Dear Fathers and other organizations. daddy gang. And so again, I do think people are starting to use social media more abundantly to shape narratives. But again, the conversation around just the basic roles of fathering and what fathers do, changing diapers, formula, all of those things are something that, again, I'm hope that we can do some more deeper studies engaging dads around their parenting practices. Questions. I think we got a question in the Q&A box. Let me see what that.
I think there's two.
Okay, Dr. Caldwell, shows like The Cosby Show, Blackish, Family Reunion depict Black fathers as being active and engaged, but these fathers are affluent and resident, which may not portray the experience or barriers of non-residential Black fathers. What are your thoughts about this? Procter & Gamble had a commercial campaign portraying the talk, but women were primarily viewed as being the parent having these conversations. There are some representation of Black fathers having this conversation in TV or film. Do you think this is an important conversation to be depicted on TV or film?
I will say the study picked up on that there is a bias between the representation of working class fathers and the representation of middle class fathers. And if you look at the bulk of TV commercials, you will see a large bulk of middle class Black fathers in the suburbs where you do not see any other representation, for the most part, any other representation of fathers. So this notion of middle classness seems to always be the norm in TV commercials. And that's why we went back to that cheerleading dad commercial, living in an apartment building, because we do not see that often. And many of the participants felt that there is a bias between the representation of working class fathers and middle class fathers. So I agree. Is there another question?
Yeah. Questions, comments.
I love Dr. Easley's comments. I think he was referring to you, Dr. Miller, when he said, when fathers are with their children or grandchildren, they're babysitting.
Right.
Just because society, I mean, that goes back to the point about the young man sitting with a toddler in Denny's, you know, why it resonates so much, because society don't think that we can care for little children. I'll share a brief story in my own life. We had a, 4 or 5 month old. The little one had a 2-year-old and a 8-year-old, and my wife was going out of town, and everybody was like, "Who's gonna watch the baby?" And my wife was like, "They got a daddy." Like, I'm like, what's the problem? Like, what you mean who's gonna watch the baby? But I just think that's society, and sometimes I think we as men, like, because what's the society expectation or lack thereof, that we can't care for little children. And all the studies show that is null and void, that we are great, competent caretakers of newborns and infants.
Well, that's what caused that Huggies commercial. If anyone remembers that, there was this commercial, this is probably 2 years ago, where it was a racially diverse group of dads in a kitchen, and they were someone was competing and seeing how they can change the diaper faster, and someone walked in and said, "You guys can't change diapers, so let me show you how to change a diaper." And fathers were just livid and complained again, and Huggies had to turn around and say, again, we apologize, because fathers were saying, we change diapers anywhere, everywhere, and we don't ask our wives to do it, we are capable of doing it. So this whole notion of stay in your lane, you can do this but you can't do that, is not a representation for many fathers today. Everyone is pulling their weight, helping out and trying to keep the family alive and functioning.
And I think language is important, because dads don't babysit.
Yeah.
Parent. Right. And so even correcting guys when you hear them say, "Oh, I got to rush home," I got to go pick up my child. I got to babysit because mom has to go to work. Helping them understand that we're active parents, we're fully engaged, and that we don't babysit.
Yeah.
One of the other terms, David, is and you see it changing slowly. Actually, it's changing pretty quickly, but it's still kind of out there a little bit. Is we don't use the term visitation anymore. Dads don't visit, they parent. And so you'll see the term parenting time. You'll see custody and parenting time, not custody and visitation. And those subtle changes in terminology has a huge impact on how dads even see themselves. And so if you remove a term like visitation out of their head and say parenting time, they receive that a little differently from the dad's perspective and even from the court's perspective, right? If a judge is, going to create an order and in his or her mind, they're thinking that I'm giving this father visiting rights as opposed to parenting rights or parenting time, there's a different connotation that comes. Danielle talked earlier about messaging. Like messaging matter, words matter. Like in court, the other term that I hate in court is win and lose. Like no parent wants to go in court and walk out feeling like they lost, because typically we'll say, what happened to you in court? And you'll say either I won or lost. Well, if you won or lost, there's really only one person who's impacted by the win or the loss, and that's the child. Why does your win and loss matter when you're talking about those kinds of things? And then the last one is fatherless. There is no such thing as a fatherless child. 100% of all biological children on the face of this planet has both a mother and a father. The question isn't if he exists, it is where he exists. And if you don't ask the question, where is he, then you make the assumption that he doesn't exist. The problem with that is then we tell our children that your father doesn't exist, and they don't know how to explain the hole in their heart left by the absence of their father. And so we got to be really critical about the terminology and language that we're using when we're describing what it is we're describing, because it does shift the mindset.
Yeah. Yeah.
Dr. Pryor has a question on about the change in the 90s and 2000 in regards to the different variety of perspectives of Black families.
We lost something after the early 2000s, I think.
Yeah.
I think that, let's just say it, the Cosby Show opened up something, right? Even if it was a middle class or upper middle class family portrayal, it ushered in representation of other shows. I was a big Bernie Mac lover. I just love Bernie Mac. What a loss. And I think we had so many role models back then to look and to laugh and to see family life in different dimensions. And it didn't have to just be the upper middle class, where people really complained about the Cosby Show about that. But you had role modeling, you had laughter, you had families coming together to watch the show. Think about that. And so when those shows ended, there was here comes reality TV. And that just dried up representation and engagement and challenging some of these images that we watched. And so I think, again, I'm hoping we're ushering back some of these shows. We now have George Lopez on and some others, but we lost a lot of family shows. And I think that they were doing a service in terms of just having dialogue, representation, and modeling for some of that you don't have to be this stoic personality type as a dad. You can laugh, you can be engaging, you could be competent, you could be wise, storyteller as a dad. And I think we lost something.
I do think that there has been something else that is interesting, Dr. Kelly, and that is kind of docu-series and drama series, right? And so I think that there has been a shift with respect to a much more deep introspective of fathers in the paradigm of family, right? You think about Yellowstone, for anybody who watches those Yellowstone, the
Mhm.
themes in Yellowstone 1883 and 1923 are extremely deep and moving and emotional. 911 with Angela Bassett, the fatherhood stuff in that is extremely deep. Blue Bloods, like when you watch Blue Bloods, when you watch SWAT, like there's a lot of like these very deep drama um series that are out, and one could look at things like Power and look at kind of these other things out there, but all have these deep elements of like a fatherhood narrative that's much deeper than what the sitcoms brought us, right? Like Family Matters, you go through 28 minutes, and then the last 2 minutes you're always going to know that there's a moral story, right? They're going to point you to that. This one is these things are a little more interpretive, so I'm wondering, after the 2000s, Dr. Kelly, like what has made this shift, and is that a shift that we should be looking at as a win, right? Because we are talking more deeply about fathers in those spaces.
I always say that the media, one of the good things, if I can say that, one of the good things about the media from my teaching experience in higher ed is sometimes, you can't lecture certain things, right? And I have to say, and Ken, you and I talk about this, whether it's Pookie or I show that scene with Will Smith and his father leaving. There's moments where we can have just wonderful dialogue, but that dialogue begins with that clip that gets into some real emotional feeling. I think what you're talking about, Yellowstone, even just the way that Kevin Costner talks to his daughter, right? We're watching honest dialogue happening, and we can use those clips to open up and have honest dialogue about what it means to be a son, a daughter, or husband or wife. Those are moments where we should be looking at it and saying, yes, this is now, it's not artificial constructs in terms of network television telling us, like you said, after 28 minutes, that's it, wrap it up, solve the problem, laugh. But what does that mean to us having that conversation, right? When I show that clip with Will Smith and his father walks out, everyone focuses on Will Smith. What about the father that just walked out? Right? What makes him, why does he have to run again? Right? Why can't he stay? What is it about the lack of training for him to know how to stay and deal with that hit that he's going to get, that his son is going to turn around sooner or later and say, why did you leave? Right? Absence of dialogue. So you're right. We are watching, even in Ghost and others, real dialogue. But that's where we have to have conversations to the next level. And I agree with you, the next level of family communication and family engagement.
Yeah.
And both Kenny and Dr. Kelly, you raised some really interesting points. Kenny, going back to your point, even when you look at shows like some of those docu-series shows like the Power and Shine, you look at Ghost as one of the lead characters and his deep interactions with his son, right? I don't think we can underestimate the power that has, because when you think about shows like The Power and The Shy, you have a whole audience of folks that we may not even capture in a study that follow those shows. And then when you look at The Shy, Common was one of the executive producers. There's a scene where the men, men of diverse backgrounds are really struggling with family and mental health. And one of the brothers who had done some time in jail decided to create a men's group, and the men were able to come together, and they showed a couple episodes where the men really came together to talk about fatherhood, talk about mental health, talk about employment. And so even in some of these more gritty television shows that are primarily on cable, you do see some deep interactions and conversations around fatherhood, mental health, parenting, etc.
Yeah, and I wonder if all of that is kind of opening up the space, because we haven't had a chance to talk about how the field of responsible fatherhood is responding to the changing nature of fatherhood, where you're seeing more dialogue in fatherhood spaces around the interests of including them in maternal health care. And being caretakers, right? Not only of their children, but being caretakers of their parents. David, you and I talk a lot about, being Black men who were in the position of having to care for our parents. Many of us are looking at that, and the increasing, number of dads who are now looking at professions like being doulas, in the space of maternal health care and those kind of things. So the landscape is definitely shifting. Whether it has shifted far enough for us to feel like it has shifted is another question.
I think this is a good study, a new study, looking at these shows and asking men what did they walk away with, their observations, their perceptions, and their feelings. I think that's new terrain. I do.
Definitely. And some intriguing research topics like the rise of Black men as doulas. Again, don't think you're going to find a lot of studies in that area. And then, as Kenny alluded to, I took care of my dad for 4.5 years. So you have dads who are taking care of their parents is in the caregiving space of some other studies. Ladies and gentlemen, any additional questions? We're getting ready to go to conclusion and call to action. This has been an extremely rich dialogue, and of the paper and infographic and other things will be forthcoming. Please drop any additional questions, reflections, comments you have. And so, Dr. Janice, Dr. Shears, Kenny, we're going to go to conclusion and call to action.
Okay.
So who wants to take that?
I'm in the middle of something. Hold on.
You okay?
Yeah, I was sending something. Go ahead.
Okay. So we got 3 buckets: brands, consumers, media professionals. I would definitely say for media professionals, we got to be at the table.
Yeah.
We have to be in places and spaces where we can lend voice. I mean, we go back to the Macy's ad or the Heinz ad or some of the other both print media and television media that have that buy into these stereotypes about Black fathers. We got to push to be at the table. We got to push to ensure, from a content perspective, a creative perspective, language, wardrobe. Somebody thrown in the chat earlier about wardrobe and hair, and the authenticity of the commercials that represent Black fathers. Again, we have some serious media professionals, but are they in positions? I know there's a lot of folks that are doing documentaries and film, but we also need them to be more involved and help position them to be more involved at the creative end in terms of how a lot of these commercials are developed. Because really quickly, sometimes I'll see a commercial and the commercial will be so bizarre. I'm trying to figure out, like, are these people getting high or something? I mean, the commercial will be so bizarre, right? And so somebody green lighted this commercial. And so again, I think we have to have more people who understand authentic fatherhood in general, and then beginning to look at the diversity of fatherhood at the creative table.
I'll talk about the importance for brands, just because, I think it's encompassing upon, our organization, other fatherhood organizations, to really help society understand the importance of father, the unique contribution fathers make in the lives of children. I'm always surprised when I speak to professionals and people who work with families, and, I share that, fathers in rough and tumble play, which highly correlated with self-regulation, which is highly correlated with school readiness. And they don't know. And I'm like, y'all work with families. Like, how do you not know the unique contributions fathers make in the lives of children, and how men parent naturally is beneficial to children? And so part of us even helping this call to action and assisting how we are portraying fathers, that we continue to need to we need to continue to get information out in the literature, maybe even in the mainstream literature, is this is why fathers are important. Because I always kind of joke, I start a lot of presentations off with, if you ask most people why are mothers important in the lives of children, just people in the street, they can probably give you a pretty good rundown list of why mothers are important. You ask folks why are fathers important in the lives of children, most of them will pause and may say, well, they're providers. You know, they send in a check, but okay, what is it about fathers' interaction with his children that are important? Most people aren't going to be able to tell you those things specifically. So I think, and we're going to take some responsibility to continue to push information out in the spaces around the unique contributions of fathers in the lives of children, and then hopefully be intentional about making sure that these images and the commercials and things that we see accurately reflect the importance of fathers and, you know, activities and attitudes and things of that nature. So accurately depict fathers in a positive light.
And this goes to the consumer section. Companies don't want to lose your dollars, right? You're spending money. And so if you have to voice a complaint about representation of any kind, have a voice. Get political. I think we're going to have to get political in the next 4 years, but get political on the representation of what you want to see and what's happening. And call out what you think is, if there's something was overlooked or something was a stereotypical behavior. And let the advertising industry know that you didn't care for that. There are so many watchdog organizations that exist. We need to have one that calls out when we see a bias. And that's where consumers come in, right? So I just think that we need to have some kind of a supportive organization. And we used to have it in the 70s and 80s and even early 90s of people calling out some organizations for their portrayals. We need to bring that back again.
Okay.
And one of the things I think we were talking about amongst ourselves here was having kind of not a watchdog, but an organization where at the end of the annual year, we would like to award, remember we were talking about that? Award a company or product or representation of some kind to say, this is why this was an outstanding commercial or print ad that represented Black fathers in a positive way. I think we need to have that. And let people know that people are watching what is out there.
No, I think that critically important that we honor those brands that honor us. I mean, because we know in this country we spend a whole lot of money.
Yeah.
So how do we honor those brands that honor the humanity of dads and you know, Black dads and other dads? And so, ladies and gentlemen, so there was a question or comment in the chat about how do we engage social service agencies around some of this content? Great question. Check out Papa University. Just take a picture of your screen, which is full of resources. And if you're in need for folks to come out and do some work, you know, with your agency, we'll be bringing up the final slide will be contact information. But again, these are some of the deeper conversations that we need to have with fathers and families, particularly when we think about some of the ongoing perceptions that people have. When we talk about, you know, Dr. Jeff talked about the 2018 CDC study that informed us that, Black fathers are more involved in their children's lives than fathers of other racial groups. Black dads are changing diapers. If you go to an elementary school, you see Black dads involved in drop off and pickup. Black dads are doing homework. Again, there's data that needs to be, there's more accurate data that needs to be uplifted that we just don't necessarily hear about or see. If you need to get in touch with us, here is the information. You can click on to the QR code. If you're interested in some of the other studies that we've collectively released, you can just reach out to us and we can send that information. Any burning questions that we may have missed, because the chat was on fire? Any burning questions that we may have missed? Well, ladies and gentlemen, again, thank you. I want to thank Dr. Kelly, Dr. Shears, and Kenny Braswell, Fathers Incorporated. Stay tuned. The published paper will be forthcoming along with an infographic summarizing many of the key points, because we want to start, our goal is to start creating an infographic to do a better job of highlighting the research and condense it in a way that non-academics can understand some of the content and some of the research that's being done. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you. Be safe.
Thank
Keep
you.
your head on the swivel. Drink plenty of water. Mind your business. And we'll see y'all the next time.
Count your chickens in your mouth.